Let's be strategic. Let's plan. Let's be thoughtful and intentional, because then that's how you get incremental value.
And that's great that you guys can diffuse that right from the beginning and start to emerge in their mind as that strategic partner that is actually going to help them.
At what point should a business owner realistically start thinking about their exit?
Today.
Actually yesterday.
I love that.
If you haven't
Yesterday.
yesterday, it is hands down. It's the thing that breaks most deals is the financial hygiene.
Be opportunistic. Like, by preparing, it allows you to say yes to things when the opportunity is there.
Welcome back to Wade Through It All. I'm your host, Abigail Wade. I'm a financial advisor and a certified financial planner with RM Wade & Company of LPL Financial.
And I'm Robert Wade, president of the firm and also a financial advisor.
Today, we're talking about something that many business owners eventually face, but don't always start planning for early enough. What happens when it's time to transition out of the business you've built? For many entrepreneurs, their company is their largest asset. It represents years of hard work, long days, and a lot of personal sacrifice. But when the time comes to step away, whether that's 5 years from now or 15 years from now, many owners realize they're not quite sure what their options actually look like.
You know, and this is something that we see quite often in our practice. Many of the people we work with are everyday business owners. They've built their company from the ground up and spent most of their time focused on running the business, serving their clients and customers, and taking care, obviously, of their families. Thinking about an exit strategy really is way down on that priority list.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited about today's topic and with our guests that we have.
Kind of like retirement. It feels far off and elusive, but the quicker, the earlier you can start, the better. So
exactly.
That's where, conversations about mergers and acquisitions can come in. M&A simply stands for mergers and acquisitions, which is the process of buying, selling, or combining businesses. For founders, that could mean selling their company, bringing on a strategic partner, selling a portion of the business, or even structuring a transition over time. But one of the biggest misconceptions we hear is that once you start talking to an M&A firm, you're handing over the keys to the kingdom overnight, like that.
Yeah, and in reality, that's rarely the case. So many founders, begin planning, years in advance so that they can position their company to be properly to this point, understand their options, and ultimately structure a transition that makes sense for their families and their futures.
Yes. So that's exactly what we're talking about today. Joining us are guests Dena Jalbert and Lori McLane from Align Business Advisory. Dena is the founder and CEO of Align Business Advisory. She brings nearly 20 years of experience helping founders build, scale, buy, and sell businesses. She's a CPA, she holds an MBA, and her career includes time with Big Four, public accounting and consulting firms, as well as executive roles with Fortune 500 and high-growth middle-market companies. So she's a smart cookie. As an M&A advisor, she has facilitated more than $3 billion in buy and sell side transactions, working on deals involving companies like Visa, Bank of America, Hewlett-Packard, and Google. Dena has been recognized as a rising star of M&A by M&A Advisor magazine and named one of the top 25 women in mid-market M&A by Mergers and Acquisitions magazine. Align Business Advisory has also been recognized as the best mid-market M&A consultancy in the Southeast for the past 4 years, and she and her firm have been featured in publications like Fast Company Inc. and Entrepreneur. And beyond all of that professional experience, she's a founder, a CEO, and a mom. So we're also joined today by Lori McLane. She's a partnerships executive at Align Business Advisory. Lori focuses on business development and building strategic partnerships, helping connect founders with opportunities that support long-term growth and strategic transactions. She's spent several years working closely with organizations, particularly in the healthcare sector, identifying market opportunities and supporting mergers and acquisitions that align with long-term business goals. Lori is based right here in South Florida, so we're really glad that both of you could join us today.
Yes, welcome. We're really excited about this topic.
So much awesome having us.
Great introduction.
I know.
I'm like, sit here while I tell your life story.
Yeah.
Great. I love it.
So we're so excited to have you here. So both of you, we want to hear about, your background and how you got into M&A and, all that good stuff.
Sure.
So I started with, I kind of tripped my way into M&A, I guess. So I'm a CPA by trade.
Mm-hmm.
So, at the wise age of 20 years old in college, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew what I was kind of good at. Numbers were always a part of that. And so I took an accounting class. I was good at it, wound up majoring in it, but I also minored in economics because I liked how the two one is the result of the other. And it was just, who knew, 25 years later, that it would end up being what I would do forever. So I was very lucky and was recruited by Arthur Andersen in Chicago to come work for them. But I went straight into their consulting and transaction advisory group, which is pretty rare. Usually you do tax or audit if you're a CPA. And so I went through the interview process and you're like, well, you're not quite a fit for our traditional audit or tax practice. And at that time, I was devastated because I'm like, I just want a job. I'm 21 years old. And,
Right.
but, here we are 25 years later. I've done deals ever since. So, I've been a buyer of businesses over those years. So started with, being a service provider. And then I went in-house and did corporate development for the organizations and the investors. So we were working with private equity firms and corporate strategics who were acquiring businesses. And over my tenure, I noticed that the acquisition targets became smaller and smaller. And so instead of buying one big one, they were going to go buy 20 smaller ones. And that was a really interesting dynamic to watch. And then in 2008, 2009, when that financial crisis took place and it was an illiquid recession, the only deals that were getting done in M&A were of, these smaller businesses. And so then in turn, I watched Wall Street get real smart, and they went and raised all these funds to go buy businesses and enact that buy and build thesis. Also, being the buyer of businesses, I saw that the owners that I was working with to buy their businesses weren't represented. They would, have an attorney and a CPA sometimes, sometimes not, and it just didn't feel good to watch them transact their life's work and then feel frustrated by that and that outcome. Being the buyer, I guess that was supposed to feel good because I got probably 2 turns off of it. I would have, gladly paid more, but didn't. And, like anything in life, you see something and you're like, that shouldn't really be like that. So that's really where, my history of M&A and kind of where Align was born from. It all started. Was just kind of watching it being done wrong and saying, well, hey, I think we could do it differently. So,
Wow, that's so cool. So typically, walk us through that process of, when a business owner is looking to say, hey, maybe I don't have kids and they're going to follow me. So there's no passing that baton on to somebody else in the family or something of this nature. And you're looking at, okay, maybe I do want to sell my business or look for that strategic partner. Walk us through that process and kind of how it works.
Yeah, we all only know what we know. And so what I love about that question and those conversations is you start with the person. And I would imagine, it's particularly important because you have to start with, what do you want as a person? How much longer do you want to work? Maybe you're not like ready to fully retire on a beach. Maybe you are. The point is, I think business owners are often surprised that they have choices. What we see a lot when we talk to business owners is they're reacting to something that comes to them. And when they meet with us, I think they realize, well, gosh, no, I can be really strategic and thoughtful about this and plan what that looks like. And not just, because someone came in and offered to buy my business, that sounds great. But it might not fit with my life choices. So that's where we love, partnering with folks like yourselves who can help owners think through, what do I want for me? What do I want for my life to look like? And so it starts there. And then we look at their business and say, okay, you're in XYZ sector. Here's what's going on in the M&A market for XYZ sector. If you're in waste management, we can give them a purview of, well, here's what's going on in M&A within your industry, because timing's everything, right? I think any of us always want to, it's the age old, buy low, sell high. So if you're in an industry where M&A is pretty rampant, a good example of this is roofing. If I were a roofer, no matter my age, I would probably listen to the market right now, because there's just a lot of M&A opportunity out there. And so, it might be worth taking a look maybe a little sooner than you would have thought, because the market is strong. So we combine those two things, the personal need, where the business sits, and what the market has. And we our job is to mush those together. And when you mush those together, out comes who the right profile of investor or acquirer is. Example, Lori's done a good bit in healthcare. We worked with a veterinary practice many years ago, very early days of our firm, and he was 78. Had a 4-location vet practice actually down here in South Florida, and he got an unsolicited offer from PetSmart. One of them, it may not have been PetSmart, but one of the big publicly traded, they were acquiring vet hospitals to have them in their, as a service within their retail stores. And they made this giant offer to him, and he was so shocked by it. Luckily was connected to us through an advisor. But the catch was, this offer was going to be paid out to him over a 10-year period. He's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I might die before I see all my money.
Right, exactly.
So you have to pair the personal timeline and the wants and desires along with, the opportunity. So that's how we usually start the process is, what do you need from your life? And then what can the market provide? Hopefully they mesh together, but then also it's equally as impactful if it doesn't, because then what power and knowledge is that? Like, then you have time to go proactively address if there is a gap between, what you want and what the market can afford. And so we like just educating folks on what their options are, so that they can just make smart decisions whenever that is. Whether it's now or in 30 years.
Right.
It's just, for me, just to touch on a little bit about my background as well. I started this kind of journey, probably 5 years ago. Prior to that, I was in facilities and construction management, go figure, right? And then I decided, I'm a strong believer that the universe kind of puts things in front of you when you're ready for it. And I was working for an organization. I was the facilities manager, kind of running all of their practices here in South Florida. And they partnered with a private equity, and they started to do their national expansion. And I joined that group. And like Dena, I was kind of on the buy side of things as well. So I saw a lot of times as a business development professional, connecting folks with, with our group, underrepresented, especially the target audience that we were kind of approaching. And it was just one of those things where, me being as relationship driven as, being a business development professional, it's a hard pill to swallow, seeing someone that may be evaluated, at $20 million. I'm just using that as a number. And, us going in and offering 10 or 15, and they just don't have that proper representation to understand what they're really worth. So, that world is interesting enough. And now being in this position now, it's like you get to kind of come in like an army and get in front of work with business owners before buyers get in front of them, right? To really prepare them for that transaction.
Yeah, because business owners don't know what they don't know.
They don't.
Of course.
They don't. So
And I think that there's a lot of misconception when you're talking about M&A, where they're like, oh, you're an M&A expert, which means I'm immediately going to be lowballed on my value. This is, but you can see where I'm going with this.
For sure.
And it's like, well, wait a minute, I've got a private equity firm that's going to come buy my practice or buy my company. And you're thinking that from a company perspective, you're like, oh man, this is going to be not good, because it's going to be a low bid, because these guys want to buy it as low as they can.
Right.
And you, the owner, want as much as you can to get out of it. So how do you work with that? How do you work around that?
Yeah, it's that's where planning is so important, right? Because I think, to your point, the misconception about M&A, you have one conversation and immediately tomorrow you're selling your business, right? Like you let in with, which is so smart. It can be if you want it to be, but I think we would all say that anytime you do something under duress like that in your life, and big and small, it only, ends up working out 50% as good as it could. So So imagine if you empowered yourself to start planning in advance.
Mhm.
I actually like to say, listen, start with the end in mind. We actually do a lot of thought leadership with startups and early stage companies just to say, hey, listen, as you build and scale along the way, keep these things in mind. Even if it's 25 years from now, the power you have around the knowledge of what it can look like is it's just so impactful. And so, again, business owners think like, oh, then you just want to take my business tomorrow. All my people will be on the street. And so what we love to do is actually educate them like, no. This is the opposite. We're here to empower you to be in the driver's seat. So that's where, back to my earlier statement around like, we talk with them. What do you want as a person? We have a client, for example, who he's like, I want to stay on, but I don't want to run the day to day anymore.
Right.
I'm
Mhm.
really good
everyone's
at
so different.
sales.
They get
Like
to
I'm a
choose.
sales rainmaker.
Mhm.
And so that's he stepped over. He became the president and head of sales. The company grew 250% organically just
Wow.
through new
Wow.
sales.
That's awesome.
They brought in a corporate CEO to do the stuff he just
didn't
was
wanna
like,
do.
absolutely
Right.
not.
Yeah.
And he's
Focus on
holding
his
equity in it and is going to do really well. Actually, I think they might be putting their book out this year. And so, and this client is a great case study to answer your question in that he had no idea that that was an option to
Right.
him.
Right.
He was brought to us because someone knocked on his door. It was a competitor. He's like, I'd rather die than sell to them. But it did get me thinking,
Mhm.
like, well,
What are my
if these guys,
options?
like,
Yeah.
what are my options and what else is out there and what should we be thinking about that we're not? And so that's really what we love to do, is to help folks realize that just because someone is asking to buy your business doesn't mean you have to do it that second. You
Right.
can go slow to go fast. And we often recommend that because you go through a transaction, there's tax structuring you should think about. There's trust and estate things that you should think about that you probably haven't had to think about yet because you're not fully liquid. And so, and we are not those, that's not our bailiwick, but
Same with
we say go slow, go fast. Like, let's
Right.
be strategic, let's plan, let's be thoughtful and intentional, because then that's how you get incremental value. One of our a recent client is a good friend and fan of ours, and he had a letter of intent in his hands from a buyer, and was put in touch with us through his wealth advisor. He's out in Utah. And we wound up getting him 40% more than what he had in
Wow.
that piece of
Yeah.
paper.
That's awesome.
And he was partnered with someone who could then help him with the right tax strategy to fit his personal financial needs and age of his kids and this and that. And he actually saved quite a bit on capital gains. And so it takes that army that Lori mentioned,
Right.
Yeah.
to help with that fear of like, oh, they're just coming to
Right.
take
me away.
Right.
Take it away.
Exactly.
Take it all
Right.
away.
Exactly.
Totally.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
emotional.
that's great that you guys can diffuse that
Yes.
right from the beginning and start to emerge in their mind as that strategic partner
Yeah.
that is actually going to help them, and
Educate,
it's
too.
actually, it's a benefit to them
for
Yeah.
sure.
to have you guys involved.
So something we focus on, not to cut you off, is education and helping people understand what
Right.
we're doing.
Right.
So one question I have for Lori, because she's business development, like how
Gotcha.
do you, like what kinds of people are approaching you? And then how do you like empower them to approach you and know that you're there to like educate and help them hold their hand, not, get the deal done?
Right. So like for me, I think one thing, like from a healthcare perspective, I'm going back to that, right?
Mhm.
Like I want to be in a position where, like to Dena's point, there are options out there for you, right?
Mhm.
There's not that like we're this person coming in, taking you away, taking your business away, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
You are a physician, right? What did you go to school for? You went to school to become a physician. You
Mhm.
love seeing patients. That's your passion. And then all of a sudden you're in a position where I have to run a business as well,
Mhm.
right? And then they're faced with this kind of doing two jobs at the same time. And it's like,
Right.
I'm here to help you try to understand that you can potentially just slow down a little bit. Have
Mhm.
someone take away that
Mhm.
administrative burden from you.
Mhm.
Focus more on the seeing your patients and just kind of, understand that, there's that world for you.
Mhm.
And again, being a business development professional, you're just trying to connect them with the right people
Yeah.
to be able to help them understand that.
Yeah.
So
Lori does a really good job of meeting people where they're at.
Mhm.
Like, so, in that vein of your question, just getting an understanding of where they are in their life, who they are. Again, I mean, it's kind of a recurring theme. And then I'm sure you see the same thing when they see that you're there to genuinely help. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
their shoulders actually kind of like, oh, you're going to help me figure this out. Because
Right.
at first,
Yeah.
like, they're nervous.
Oh,
my
yeah.
life's work. And again, you're here to take. And then they meet someone like Lori who's like, no, hey, just tell me about you. And
Right.
what does your goals look like? And did
Yeah.
you know that there's this just huge menu of options? And then you can like start to see the body language start to
Right.
It's
relax.
It's so rewarding to see that
Yeah.
too, that discovery call and just having
Yeah.
that conversation. And we love to do it where it's just not, all right, we're reading off a piece of paper where it's like, what's happening
dollars
here?
and
Da-da-da.
cents.
Yeah,
Yeah,
dollars
yeah,
and
yeah.
cents. No, I want to
Yeah.
talk to you. Like, what's going on here? Like, why are you
Mhm.
even thinking about this?
Right.
Right? Like, what's going on with your life?
Yeah.
And then that way you can kind of start to build that scenario for them that they're very comfortable with. And they start to feel and that's what we want, right?
Yes.
We want to make sure that they're in a position where, because this is a huge decision for them.
Yes.
This is life changing,
Yes.
right? You want to work with folks that you are comfortable with and
Yes, and
that are going to
trust.
change your life entirely.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
It's just, it's really
Yeah.
rewarding that
Yeah,
aspect.
and that's very similar to what we do is build trust, you know, and so it's not just strictly a numbers thing. It's like, oh, your business is 2.5 times your revenue or whatever the case may be.
right.
You know, it's more of a strategic partner that's going to be there through thick and thin.
That's
So,
right.
And I love learning how they got to that point too, right? Like,
100%.
tell me about your business.
Like, how
How'd
did you
get
grow
there?
this?
Who are
Yeah.
you?
The origin story is the best.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
my favorite.
Well, they're all entrepreneurs. I
Yeah,
mean, you know,
yeah.
so they have a
Yeah.
passion for
Of
whatever
course.
it is that they're
Yes,
doing.
Yes.
And I just love that.
Yeah.
You know, because you know we put our entrepreneurial hat on all the time.
100%.
So,
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
So at what point should a business owner realistically start thinking about their exit?
Today.
Yeah.
Like actually yesterday.
Yeah.
I love that.
If you haven't
Yesterday.
yesterday, today.
Yeah.
No, genuinely, like I said, I mean, in a perfect world, you start with the end in mind. But no, you know, I would say that what I find, and I know you see this too, most entrepreneurs don't give themselves a lot of time for that
Mhm.
altruistic reflection. They're just so like in it, right? You got to approve payroll, got to make sure those calls are getting done. I got to, you know, go shake hands with our top customer and
Yeah.
approve the marketing thing. And there's just so many different pieces flying at them at any given time that it's hard to step back and have reflection to even be able to answer some of those big questions. And
Right.
that's really where I think advisors like ourselves are helpful. I actually say we actually just create the space for you to go, I hadn't thought about that. So
Mhm.
talking to folks long before you may be actually going to do it. The reason we are so big on that is just because it creates that space for you to start to be like, well, what do I want that to look like? And
Right.
it will change over time as you go through seasons of life. You know,
Oh, yeah.
I'm 47, 35-year-old Dena was much different than 47-year-old Dena. And so the answers, depending on where you are and the different points and times in your life, can change.
Mhm.
And that's great, as they should. And so, but by being strategic, and as those changes happen and you're planning early, your plan can shift with you and will accommodate for those things and the what ifs and the how and the this. So we always say it's never too early. And you should always be getting a pulse on what's going on in the market.
Right.
That's going to make your business better whether or not you transact. So that's one of the biggest, I think, things that groups like ourselves offer is like, hey, we can give you a pulse of what's going on in the M&A market. What drives value there? What are other people doing? Not with the vein of, well, then you should copy and do it too. It's just really more, we all just want to be knowledgeable about what's going on in our own industries and sectors, because that's just going to make me run my business better and,
Right.
you know, and help me in the short term as well as the long term. So never too soon.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we
Agree.
always say about like retirement. Like I was on the phone with a 24-year-old today.
Yeah.
And she's like, you know, it just seems really far off, this retirement. I'm like, yeah, but the more you do now
The
and
better
the
off.
more you invest, I'm like, listen to me. I'm like, hold my hand when I tell you this. Like
Yeah.
you invest a little bit over a long period of time, like you give yourself more choices. So
That's
that's the
right.
same thing for business owners. And a lot of the time when we're doing their full financial plans, we're doing estate planning, we're doing
Mhm.
tax planning, we're looking at their business, but they don't always factor in the value of the business as like, oh, that's a retirement asset too.
Of course.
But how am I going to use it in retirement? Am I selling it? Am I giving it
Mhm.
to, you know, my children?
That's right.
Right.
Am I partnering up with, you know, a
Sure.
partner and doing a buy-sell agreement, you know, things like that. And it becomes the earlier you start, the more options you have.
Yeah.
100%. And I think that it's what you guys are touching on is, you know, start today about that planning process, because so many, as you touched on earlier, so many businesses, and especially on the entrepreneurial side, these guys are grinding.
Oh.
These
Oh,
guys
yeah.
and gals. I mean, they're not thinking about their anything other than the grind. And so to step back and go, let's look at it from a 30,000 foot view because it's rarely ever done. I think that is really, really paramount.
100%. I mean, the earlier you can start to wrap your head around it, the more it'll be less of an overwhelming thing too when it happens, because you're just smarter, you're more prepared.
Yeah.
You're more knowledgeable about it, so it's going to seem less daunting because it is a very emotional thing.
Mhm.
You know, it's years of hard work, and so when it does happen, whenever that is, if you aren't prepared, it's 10 times as emotional and it's 10 times as hard because it's so much more scary and there's unknowns and you're just not, you don't feel prepared, and they ask for something you just don't have, and then you get spun up on that. And if you just back that up, and I especially think, you know, the planning piece for personal finances is so important, because a lot of clients will be like, well, I need X dollars, and then there's going to be, you know, X percent of tax that I'm going to have to pay, so I need it to be Y. Okay, I see your reverse math there, but are you really sure that that's the right math?
Mm-hmm.
And so let's figure out what the right math is. And what I often find is a lot of owners are surprised that the number is usually much lower than they think it has to be,
Right.
because it's all been tied up in there for so long. So it's ambiguous. That's why we always advocate, like, no, listen, sit down with someone and put that plan together. And especially if you have kids, you know, there's so many business owners that are grinding and yet still don't have simple wills and trusts.
No.
I
And
Yeah.
like,
see
if you
it
have
all the
kids,
time.
and
See
like
it
the state
all
could take
the
them if
time.
something happened. Like,
Right.
Yes.
at least go get that right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm like, if you have kids, I'm like, anyone, just please.
Yeah. You don't
I
want to put the
know, I
judge in
know.
the driver's seat of somebody's
But
future.
let alone
I
their
know.
business too.
Yeah, let alone your business. So it also then whenever the time comes and whatever method you choose to change or, you know, transition your business, you're more objective because you're rooted in what you need. And then you know what's air quote gravy, what's a benefit. You know, we had one client, he's like, oh, I only need 7.5. I was like, well, I'm so proud of you that you sat down with someone and you know that.
Right.
So, but your business is worth 55. So now you have a high class problem of
What are you doing?
generational,
Right.
and like they're very philanthropic. So it's like, okay, now you need to talk about all these different charitable avenues and structures. And so I was like, again, let's go slow to go fast. You have to get all that stuff in place first.
Mhm.
Don't let, you know, if I get a letter of intent in my hand, it's already for you. It's too late
It's too
to
late.
spin that
Yeah.
stuff up,
Right.
and
Yeah.
get the benefit of it all. So let's go slow to go fast.
I do
Yeah.
like the idea of having that conversation with them. And, you know, when you're meeting with a business owner from our side of the fence and being able to ask them, have you talked about this with your financial planner, what it's going to
Yeah.
look like? I can't recall a time where we were kind of in a position on the buy side, like working with business owners like that, just making sure that they have a general idea of what it's going to look like or what it should look like for them.
Yes.
If they
or
sell
how
their
much,
business.
just something as simple as your standard of living. Like, how
Right.
much do you spend a year?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
are we going to be able to like maintain that? Yes or
For
no?
sure.
And
I
why or
love
why
that
not?
we put an emphasis on that now.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you need to understand that as well.
Because a lot of people
right?
don't have a pulse on that.
Yeah.
Sometimes. I mean, it's a good I always say it's a good problem to have. You don't have to
course.
worry about it.
Yeah.
But let's just for sake of, sitting down and doing a
Sure.
plan.
I
So-
tell folks all the time, I'm like, listen, your wife or partner likes a certain type of handbag.
Of
They're
course.
not going
No.
backwards.
Yeah.
They're not going to walk backwards.
No.
Yeah, we run into that all the time. It's like, oh, I'll be retired. I won't be spending any money. It's
it'll be
like,
fine.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
driving a 911 now. I don't think you're driving like a 30-year-old
That's what
pickup
I'm
truck.
saying. Like, just be real about it.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
do you want to
Honest,
travel
yeah.
the world?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
That's
It's just
fine.
going to cost money, so let's plan for that.
Right.
And and especially for us, I'll be honest with you, it also helps in a deal for the seller to know what they'll fight over and what they won't.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you're
Oh, like
rooted in your
non-negotiables.
need, sometimes I've seen people get really spun up, like they'll drop $1 to fight for 2 pennies. And you're like, but in the grand scheme of things, do we care too much about this?
Mhm.
We had a client, again, it was a 9-figure deal, and he was spinning up about a $10,000 like item on the balance sheet. And I was like, that's less over like less than 1% of what we're talking about
Yeah,
here. Like,
yeah.
can we and the meters are running with the lawyers. So
Yeah.
this will wind up costing you more than that. Can we just let this go? Right.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes because it's emotional and it's easy to get tied into that. So when you have all that planning done, you have a level of there's power in it not being ambiguous. So then when those things come up, you're like, you know what? Yes, I'm going to die on this hill, or no, I'm not going to die on that hill.
Yeah.
And that's okay. There's not a right or wrong answer, but you're much more empowered.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah. 20,000-foot views are always pretty good sometimes.
yeah.
Indeed.
Uh-huh.
Indeed.
So when you say planning and, with the end in mind, I love that because I'm always end in mind. Like, okay, you want to retire at this date? Okay, here's what you need to do to get there.
Okay.
So for all the business owners who are listening, like what can they do now? Let's say they're in early days and they're just starting to pick up momentum. What makes a company attractive to buyers, and how can you actively during your earning years when you're scaling do good things to be more valuable?
Yeah. I would say the three biggest things, these are always my top three pieces of advice, are one, it's never too early to have good financial hygiene in your business. So get a good controller or bookkeeper, or there's a lot of even great fractional resources. It doesn't have to be a full-time salaried person. There's some really great third parties that can keep your books crystal clean. Whether or not you transact, it will, as you were just kind of alluding to, it'll make your business better along the way because you'll have so much more visibility into your profits. So then if you know, hey, if I do this, it creates that level of profit. Or I try that and that actually, nope.
You can
we
see the
underpriced
impacts of your
that.
efforts.
You can see the impact. So that's just going to make you make more money in the short term. So that's just good business hygiene. That's the CPA in me too. It's just from the jump, make it be clean. And no one is not, that's probably the most unsexy topic to say, but it is hands down. It's the thing that breaks most deals is the financial hygiene.
Yeah.
It really is.
Like the due diligence portion and
due
handing over 10 years of documents and then we're missing 3 years or it's unclear what happened here.
Right.
Yeah, they're like, I have the best business ever. Well, on paper, it looks
not so
really
much.
bad.
No clue what's happening.
So I hear you and no one's disputing that you have an amazing business.
Yeah.
And that happens often too, where they're just speaking to the top of the mountain, how fabulous things are. And then all of a sudden you look at it on paper and you're like,
I can't, it's
this
hidden
isn't, it's
in here
not,
somewhere.
math isn't
Not so much.
mathing.
The math is not mathing.
Math is not mathing. I love that.
So financial hygiene, definitely number one. Number two, I would say, don't let the owner or founder be the sole rainmaker or revenue producer in your
110%.
business.
Yeah.
We tend to be in the beginning, and that's fine in the beginning, but just know that over time, build an institutional sales and marketing, which could just be one other person. We're not saying it has to be anything drastic or huge, but if it rests on the shoulders of the owner to be the relationship person, a buyer is going to look at that and say, well, the relationship person is going away. And or even if they're sticking around, they've got a bag of money now and probably aren't going to work maybe as hard as they were before because they've worked hard to not have to.
They're
do
fading
that.
out and
Retiring
exactly.
as one would. And so then what we see is that it trips up that succession ability. So I would say over time, make sure that someone else in the organization owns the relationships. So start bringing in those people and getting them matriculated into those relationships early. That's actually one of the reasons we have built the portion of our organization that Lori sits in is creating those partnerships so that it's not specific to any one person in our firm. Because in professional services, those relationships tend to be very one-to-one, right? Which is wonderful, but if Joe Smith hit lotto and was like, listen, I'm done working, and then all those relationships die with him, well, that doesn't quite benefit, that's a hole and a void you have to fill. So it's the same concept for business owners. Don't be the only rainmaker. And then the third would be, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So what I mean by that is don't have one customer that comprises the majority of your revenue. Even if you've had them for 30 years, that they've been a customer from the most
loyal,
They're so loyal. And I was like, yeah, okay. But clearly they're loyal and change just introduces variability. So a buyer comes in, buys the business. They may have a visceral reaction to that. And then that client is like, well, I'm not signing up for the 32nd year. and now 80% of the business has gone away, right? So revenue diversification is really important. That's the number 2 thing I see hang deals up often, or really it discounts the value of a client right now, where that's the exact argument. They have 50% revenue customer concentration, and the owner's like, but we're worth more. I'm like, yes, but, and so sometimes those are the hard conversations we have to have with them.
That is very
I was like, but we can structure the deal in a way that over time, because they're staying on, like over time, as that mix improves, you can earn incremental, like proceeds for that, so that you're not, having to trade one for the other, but being aware of that and being proactive in that before you go to market, and having, I say one customer should never comprise more than 25% of your overall revenue. That's the goal. Like, place to work towards. That's always so those are the 3 I would say are usually the Achilles heel that I tell folks as you're building, try to build those in.
Yeah, diversification.
What about when you've got a set of partners? So it's not just that one entrepreneur who's getting older and, there's nobody in the family to hand it on to. So he's now, or she wants to go sell. So what happens when you got 2 partners and, one may be kind of really, excited about selling or merging, and the other one's not, it's more like lukewarm. So what do you do in that situation?
I imagine you saw this a lot.
A lot. I did. It's just one of those things where you have to sit back and just try to educate. That's one thing that we love doing, of course. And then you do like a market evaluation, kind of let them know what the business is worth today. So that person who's kind of on the fence, they can kind of have a general understanding of what that looks like for them. And then, you talk to them through the entire thing, where it's just like, all right, is this for you right now? Is this an opportunity that you're looking to like potentially do? And if it's not, then, you guys need to kind of figure that out on your, and discuss with each other amongst,
page.
But this is what it looks like for you today. Yeah. Right. And then, so, I mean, there's opportunities for a business owner that could potentially like look into buying out the other, or, there's different options, but they have to be on the same page. Right.
Yeah.
But we're in a position where we could essentially educate them and let them know what it looks like today.
Yeah. So again, to that theme, due diligence before you kind of go presenting, to the world, hey, I'm ready to make a deal.
We like to have those hard conversations early.
Right.
So one of the things that's a part of our process is that market valuation that she mentioned. It's a market analysis. And so it presents that here's what's going on in your industry and in the M&A market, so that in terms of activity. Here's value for your business. But then we also talk about like those personal drivers. Yeah. And we really get at the root, like, well, what do you want personally? And when there's multiple partners, it's often very different things. So I call that the individual what's in it for me's, right?
Yeah.
And so what I often say is like, don't sugarcoat what it is you need and want, because it doesn't mean that you can't transact. It just means that who you transact with now has to meet the needs of 2 different personal individual what is in it for me, right? And so makes our job a little harder.
It's a little new,
but that's okay.
Yeah.
But let's have that hard conversation now. Or if they're at such an impasse, we do this before anyone even engages with us. Like, not a dollar has been spent, no contracts have been signed, because I'd rather flush out those impasses early.
Agreed.
Oh, yeah.
Before like you have something drawn up and now it's a big
spend
drama.
a year. Yeah. I mean, we had that happen. Sadly, we had a client in Miami a few years ago. It was 3 partners, and they were all adamant, like, yes, we definitely all myself, we've all talked about this. We're all great. Went and got offers, and then the 3rd partner was the holdout.
Yeah.
And he's the younger of the 3. The other 2 are ready to retire, but he's just got them. He's like, no, and so now, I believe that there's some like litigation amongst the 3 of them, because this guy's almost kind of holding them hostage.
Oh boy.
And it's really frustrating and sad to watch. So, having those hard conversations early before you go through a lengthy process. And so then if you need to get other advisors and mediate and figure it out early.
Yeah. Yes.
And don't be timid to just be real about what it is you want. I tell folks all the time, Lori will laugh, this metaphor I use a lot. I'm like, if you tell me you want a spotted unicorn, my job is to get you a spotted unicorn. Yeah. I'm going to tell you, though, if only like striped unicorns exist, or maybe not quite a unicorn or a horse, and you're going to be like, yes or no, like I'm, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. We'll wait till we see the spotted unicorn, like, but let's have that conversation before we start putting time, money, effort, and sleepless nights,
Right.
And it's
into it.
funny when you're having those conversations too with like a partner, and one is like gun ho, it's like leaning in and just like staring at you like, what do you got to offer me? And the other one's like, nope, not listening, don't want it. Like,
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
totally
yeah.
Good cop,
see
good cop, bad cop. You're like, okay, I got to work on this one.
So you wear kind of
totally
two
tell.
hats, though, because on one aspect, you're acting as kind of that middle kind of broker between buyer and seller. But walk us through how you also, in some cases, are the buyer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I joke that we sit in the middle and we see both sides. Our practice is predominantly sell side, but we do work because we have such knowledge of certain industries that we've done a lot of deals in, and we create good relationships with the buying community. So one of our core values is value. And what we mean by that when we say that is that, yes, we create enterprise value for our clients, right? That's number one. But we're also creating market value with the capital markets community. So we want to bring good assets and good companies to investors and to acquirers so that those will go on and grow. I'm very proud to say, and I'll knock on wood, that every single one of our clients has gone on to grow, and that business has gone on to grow and succeed subsequently post-close. And that's because of our innate knowledge and relationships with buyers too. And because of that, they'll come to us and say, well, hey, now that I have this one, I'd like 4 more just like it. Can you help us find 4 more just like it? We're like, yes, absolutely. We can help you do that, right? And that's fun for us because the strategy, it harkens back to both of our, buying days. The strategy of helping them say, okay, well, if I'm in Florida, I want to be in Georgia next, right? I want to be in Louisiana, or maybe it's a synergistic product or service to whatever they're doing. And anyway, it gets our just kind of nerdy business minds running because the strategy of that is it's like putting a puzzle together.
Yeah.
So so it's really fun. But then also because we know, that first company they buy, we know it so well. We also have and by virtue of how we work, we know what the culture is like and whether or not an acquisition could be a good fit too, because it's not just dollars and cents.
Yeah, it's a qualitative thing too. Yeah.
And so that's how we can kind of broach the other, sit on the other side as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. So you do work with like individual buyers, but also can you speak a little bit on like the PE? Like how do you find, have you helped sell to PE funds and then all of a sudden you have this great relationship with a PE fund and they want, more like it. So what does that look like?
Yes,
So
absolutely. So so private equity is probably the largest pool of buyers of lower middle market businesses, the businesses that are too big to be small and too small to be enterprise, because the idea of like, hey, we'll go buy 25 of these in a sector is easier than buying $1 billion business. And so over the years, as we've watched them all enact these strategies, we know which ones are really good at it.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that we like to help then subsequently. So for example, we have a waste management client who we sold back in 2020, has gone on to grow exponentially. And we are now helping them with buy-side acquisitions because they're wanting to add some tangential synergistic services that are outside their core, but their sales team could very easily sell into those as well. And so we're currently working on a search for them. And, again, we know the company, we know the owners, we know the investors so well that they like using us because we know them better than most in terms of who we can find that would actually come in and create value for them. And so we spend a lot of our day also really being students of the marketplace and knowing what these groups are buying. So, I'll go to New York. I go once a quarter and I'll take days of meetings where I'm just meeting with investors like, hey, you raised a fund. What thesis are you looking at? What are the good characteristics? And like getting that direct pulse out of the investment community allows us to tailor assets that, are of quality and of value, right? And then, with one usually comes, 10 more. So, and as it should. And so that's the fun part of it. So getting to understand what they want and need is just as important as meeting business owners and helping them figure out
Right.
what they want and need.
Yeah.
I joke we're yen to the matchmaker. We sit right in the middle, and I like bringing those two parts together.
Yeah, that's so cool. So you mentioned like, oh, if I was a roofer right now, I'd be like hot in the market. So what is hot in the market? Like, what are investors looking for?
Yes. So I would say any industrial service. So think any like blue collar trade business of any sort, manufacturing, logistics, plumbing, electrical, heating, air conditioning, roofing, construction, waste management, pools, landscape. Like think about all the things a business and a person or a consumer uses. And especially in areas like Florida, where there's a high population growth, that's more people command those services, right? So your ability to continue to grow is more prevalent because there's a population to support that growth. So, and COVID shone the light on this. Like they were called the essential businesses, right? Like even when the world stopped,
They're
Right.
still
Yeah.
they all got
Yeah.
up and went to work the next morning. They're like, I
Exactly.
don't know what
We all
you're
still need
talking
them.
about.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is
yeah,
broken.
yeah.
You have to come in and help us. Yeah.
Yeah.
The garbage has got to go somewhere,
Right.
you know?
Exactly.
And so, so it really shone a light on that. Those are very recession resistant. And even, in fast forward to today, in today's market, right? You've got tariffs, you've got AI disruption, and there's always change and churn. But those are the tried and true businesses that still all just continue to, to work. Healthcare is another great example of that. People get sick and get hurt regardless of what's going on, in other areas. So it's these kind of demand insensitive industries that these companies can't help but be successful because there's just so much demand. So industrials, healthcare, business services, so things like IT, but really more, everybody's talking about AI, certainly lots of opportunity there. But what we see in our demographic is more your IT managed services. So break fix, cybersecurity, just making heads or tails of what to do in all of, in today's technological world, those service providers and implementers and cyber, obviously, is, and especially to smaller businesses, those are all, pretty white hot right now. I would say that the cream of the crop, though, is definitely roofing. Waste management's always up there. Healthcare services, any standalone healthcare service, whether that's physical therapy, infusion centers, physician practices, at-home healthcare. Any of those kind of healthcare services are still wildly in demand. And again, especially in the Southeast, where you have not only a growing population, but one that's aging as well.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's funny that you
interesting.
say that about COVID. And I remember working in an office building and I had to be there. I was like probably the only person because I mentioned I was in facilities management then. And seeing all the janitors like walking around.
Yeah.
All the, they're all continuing as life is ghost town, by the
Right,
way. Like
right,
the entire
right.
office space is
Yeah.
a ghost town.
Yeah.
But everyone's there kind of, plugging away. So
Oh, yeah.
very important industrial services for sure. Dirt in your fingernail.
We're also seeing quite a bit. I would say the white collar version of that is professional services. So
Right.
accounting firms and CPA firms, IT consultancies.
Yep.
There's quite a bit of hyper consolidation there as well because it follows very much a healthcare services model. The partnerships are structured in that distribution model where every partner gets a cut of the profits
Right.
at the end
Correct.
of the year. And what investors are doing are kind of flipping it back to a more corporate model. So kind of buying out that partnership structure, giving them the capital up front instead of over a number of years, and then pivoting it to a normal just salary bonus kind of corporate structure to keep the profits in the business for growth.
Okay.
We saw it in healthcare services. A lot of these kind of partner-driven organizations, we're seeing that quite a bit. And there isn't a week that goes by that I don't see at least 3 or 4 CPA firm announcements in terms
Really?
of
Oh, yeah.
deal
Yeah.
flows. So
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me.
yeah.
Financial advising
Yeah.
practices the same thing.
Yeah, they're always,
that's
people are
that's
looking
been
to
on
buy
the move
up.
for a couple
Yeah,
years.
insurance brokerages,
Yep.
same concept. Yeah.
Yep.
So there's a lot happening there too.
So you mentioned like how we can structure business sales. So I think a lot of the misconceptions is like, okay, overnight, now your business is gone. You've worked your whole life. Okay. So what are, different structures, like the most common, and like just high level, what do those look like?
Yeah. So most deals have a form of three key components. There's the cash you get on closing day,
Mm-hmm.
which is super number one important, right?
Mhm.
Like what is that net proceeds you get the day of close? So that's cash at close. But then there are other too often used structures are what's known as an earnout, which means, okay, we're going to pay you, an extra 10 million over 3 years if the business hits these revenue
Targets.
milestones,
Metrics, yeah.
profitability targets, a metric of some
Or
sort.
like you said, diversification of customers. Like we want to see you guys have not 50% from this customer, but have, different. Okay.
100%. Some metric that is negotiated and defined before you, close.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because like for us, we always want to make sure like that's achievable, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not like, oh, you have to grow 100% before you give this.
Yeah.
money.
Like, is this even doable? Yeah.
So again, it there's an art to that, but I like earnouts for hyper growth companies who are like, well, when's the right time to sell? Because I've got all these new contracts that are coming.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, listen, you can still get today's multiple, but get paid when that growth hits. You don't have to feel as if, because otherwise I'll just wait 5 years and
Oh,
then
you're
I'll
like
sell.
missing out
Right,
on
But
right,
then I'm
right.
like,
sticker
what if
price.
the market's in the toilet in 5 years
Right.
and the multiple's lower and you're kind of in the same place? So grab today's multiple.
Mm-hmm.
We can structure it so that as those things hit, you're getting your multiple on that. So I love earnouts for that reason. And buyers like earnouts because it helps de-risk the business going backwards post-close, just because, again, change does create variability and issues. And so this way they're like, well, listen, if there's money for them to get, they're more likely to stay
Of
and
course.
make sure this is going to stay
Yes.
on and do
Right.
well. So then it's going to, de-risk our investment,
Right.
or risk of loss.
There's more skin in the game for them at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Right.
earnouts is a big one. And that one gets a bad rap.
It does.
It gets a bad rap. And I will tell you, I think it's just because they were poorly negotiated. If you set it up
interesting.
right, they can be a really great tool. If you set it up wrong, it can cause a lot of issues. So I like earnouts for that reason. And then the third is you can actually retain some equity ownership. So, and we're seeing this with both strategic buyers as well as, private equity and financial sponsors. They're seeing that folks want to have continued value creation opportunity in the future. So if they sell their business into a larger business and, rising tides lift all ships, right? So like they're one of the tides that are going to help lift all the ships. Well, they want a piece of that and vice versa, because it's that economy of scale amongst all of them that you're able to extract margin from. So, when you have 25 plumbing businesses, you can have a centralized dispatch. You can have one set of insurance. You can have finance, accounting, HR, right? And can leverage for everyone versus in their normal structure, you have 25 versions of that, right? Which is expensive. So, and buying power and marketing and all those things. And so having an equity interest means you can get a second transaction in the future. So you sell, say, 80% of your business to an acquirer. You get the other 20%. Instead of it being paid in cash, you're given stock in the bigger business.
Right.
So you're getting consideration. And then the idea is that stock you get is going to be worth 2, 3, 4, 5 times more in the future.
100%. Yeah.
Right. You still participate in the growth.
Right.
Absolutely. Yes.
I actually like that.
I do too.
Yeah.
I know we said it at the same time, but I really do like that option because especially for someone who sees the value in like building that business and wants to, they don't want to take their foot off the gas then.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I really think that that's a good option for them.
Right.
For sure.
And they don't want to step back from
Right.
a business per se. Like, hey, I'm maybe 40 years old and I want to keep working for 20 or 30 more years. Or maybe at some point I do sell the whole thing and move on and build another. There's some people who are serial business owners.
Of
Like they
course.
just want to buy and sell and buy and sell.
Yeah, we have a client who ran a small heating and air conditioning business over in Brevard County in Florida. And he was introduced to us, young guy, at the time. I mean, this was 2018. He was in his late 30s. Maybe he had just turned 40. And he's like, until I met you, I thought my business was worth like $1 million. Well, we got him, I think it was 7 or 8
Wow.
because it was a smaller business. But he rolled equity. And so he was a part of a platform of heating and air conditioning businesses, or I think 30 of them. That company then sold in 2020 for $1 billion.
No way.
So he sat on the
Wow.
cap table, and he sat on the cap table early. So he made 2 times his money in the second transaction, rolled again. At this point, he no longer worked in the business.
Right.
He's off, spends most of his days in the Keys.
I was going to
Yeah,
say, is he on a
fishing.
yacht somewhere?
Simple, bought a new house, but actually, pretty simple. Rolled again, got another 1x. I mean, I think at this point, his $7 million transaction is worth over 28
Wow.
because he's just continued
Isn't that
to
amazing?
roll it.
That's
like that.
awesome.
Yeah.
I
And
love
he's
that.
young,
Yeah.
right? So you have the power of
Smart.
time.
Yeah.
Now, that's where structures, like if you're older, using my veterinarian example, he didn't care about rolled
Yeah.
equity.
Right.
He was like, listen,
take the
that
money
cash
and
at
run.
close is
Yeah.
what I want, and the rest,
Yeah.
like,
Yep.
the power of equity, what I like too, is they not only they also set up a pool for employees. So the
Mhm.
owner can roll some equity, but then they set up a pool and they grant that to a lot of the key employees to help with transition. So those are the 3 most common structures. There's many other tricky things,
Mhm.
that can be done. And even for those 3, there's so many ways to structure those and negotiate them. And that's
Yeah.
where I say it's, an art as much as it is a science. But those are the 3 most common.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Wow.
This is
That's
awesome.
And then you did mention the this is a personal question I wanted to know. You said, okay, there's a diversification of customers, right? So what are some other metrics that business owners can focus on during their growth and scaling years that make them more attractive? Like,
Yeah.
what are some other metrics that you guys look for? Like, you're like, okay, someone comes in, they say, my business is, has all this revenue, but you're like, okay, again, the math isn't mathing. So clean books, you said, but then like, what are some key metrics beyond revenue that you look at?
Yes. And I should have brought you all hats. So EBITDA, or earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, is the basis upon which all businesses start in value, right? So it's usually a multiple of that number. And so first thing I'll say is if people don't know what that is, go find out what that is. Make sure you know what EBITDA is at any given point in time. And essentially it's your like what falls all the way to the end, to the
Right.
bottom, profit, cash, not the funny money like depreciation and things, but like cash money. So you want at least a 10% EBITDA margin. So I call it like a car, like 10 and 2 is the perfect, like ideal 20. But at the very least, you want a 10% EBITDA margin. So if you're making 50 million, you want 5 million EBITDA. If you're making $1 million, you want 100,000. Like that 10% margin is kind of the floor baseline. And the reason for that is because it indicates to a buyer that you have efficiency
Right.
in your business. Because if you have to spend 99 cents to make $1, it's not as valuable as someone who, only has to spend 50 cents to make that $1, right? Because there's that spread. So we had a client once in Wisconsin who they ran a $125 million mechanical engineering business, and they only made $5 million a year in EBITDA.
Oh my goodness.
And so I came in and I'm talking to the owners. I'm like, guys, someone has to spend $120 million to make 5?
Yeah. Something's
That's
wrong
a
with that
lot
math.
of work.
Yeah. Something's wrong with that math.
That's a lot of work. So that's not going to be super valuable to someone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean? Our margins are better than our peers. Okay, I guess if the bar is low, but like I'm telling you, if you're and they were incredulous. They're like, well, we expect to get, $500 million for our business. I was like, not on that margin, you're not.
Yeah.
And so not every dollar is made the same. So the number one metric beyond the one we talked about is at least a 10% EBITDA margin.
Okay.
Your gross margin will vary by industry. So, but I would say that most companies hold a 10 to 20% like overhead, like administration, fixed
Right.
cost, insurance, rent,
Yep.
things like that.
Payroll.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
So kind of, you can almost kind of reverse engineer your way back to like, okay, well, then that means on my widget, whether that's a product or service at the top, I'm going to need to make at least 30%
Correct.
to clear my 10.
Mhm.
So then you can say, okay, well then how do I get to 30%? Well, I need to look at my pricing. I need to look at my labor costs or my fixed, whatever, my raw materials or whatever it is, depending on the industry. So you can kind of reverse engineer your way back and let it guide you over time. And it's going to ebb and flow. And then on top of that, you want at least 3 consistent years of putting up those numbers. So
Okay.
some folks will say, well, gosh, we had a banner year last year. I want to go sell. Yeah, okay. But buyers are smart.
Right.
And they're like, okay, well, great. You had a great year. But the 2 years prior to that, we're like,
Yeah.
we're kind of mid. So how do I know which one is going to happen next year?
Right.
And then lastly, I would say be able to forecast your business 12 months ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's amazing how many times I'll talk to a business owner. I'm like, what do you think you're going to do this year? They're like, yeah, I'm not really sure.
Like this should have been.
Yeah, you
forecasted.
definitely should know what
You
you're going
should
to do this year.
kind of have a gut feel
Yeah.
for, and again, that's where those fractional kind of financial firms are really helpful because they can put a forecast together for you.
Right. I was
Correct.
going to say
Nobody's
hire it
saying-
out. Like you want to look back, but you need to look forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Not everyone it has to be a financial planning analysis wizard, to do that. And honestly, this is where AI is helpful. AI can help you do one.
Yeah. 100%.
Look
Toss
at
your
the data.
financials into it and
Mhm.
ask it to spit something out for you. That's a place to start anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So being able to forecast how we were at lunch earlier talking about a client of mine whose EBITDA got cut in half while we were in the middle of a process because of some lost contracts. And that's because they didn't have a pulse on the true forecast of their business.
Mhm.
So they were kind of surprised by all of a sudden these projects pulled out.
Right.
Yeah, it's scary.
And you want to have your hand on that at all times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And know what is an average in your industry, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's so different everywhere you go.
Yeah.
And again, it kind of leads back to the whole original thought that we had of, you got to step back and you got to go up about 20,000 and look at your business and say, okay, what's going on? What are our forecasts? What are our expenses? What kind of EBITDA do we have?
Yeah.
What is that percentage?
Yeah.
What is the market for if I'm thinking about selling? That's where that planning really comes into play.
For
Right.
sure.
Because you could be 10, 15 years away from actually pulling the trigger on this.
Yeah.
But you got to do the work now.
Yeah.
And in order to get to that point where you're like, okay, I've got everything lined up. Everything's all structured the way it should be. Let's rock and roll, and away we go.
That's right.
Yeah.
100%.
Right. And
And
for
it
them,
can-
I
yeah.
just feel like, they're in a position where they're in it all day long. So they need people like us to kind of come to them and help them in that avenue. Because
And
it's
be a little
just-
bit more objective
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, I always tell people,
100%.
I'm like, because people, obviously your portfolio when we're managing it for them is for individuals is so personal. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, we're going to take a little bit of an objective approach. We hear you and your emotions and needs, which is
course.
exactly what you guys
Right.
Yeah.
do. So
Yeah,
This
we
is
all
awesome.
kind of forget when the market goes up. Everybody's like, "Oh, it's like gravy train, not a problem." And then
Everything's
market goes down. They're like, "What the heck's going on?"
100%. Sunshine and roses. I always, with the number of clients I've sat with, they're like, oh, well, I'll just 2x my business and sell for twice as much. And I was like, if it were that easy.
Yeah,
It took
right.
you 30 years to get to where you are. But
Right.
all of
Right.
a sudden overnight, we're going to go from 5 to 10 or 2 to 5, whatever.
Exactly.
And because, entrepreneurs are eternal optimists. Well, you have to be in order
Yeah.
to
100%.
in order to do it. So,
Yep.
no shame in that. But there is a bit of, incredulousness,
Yeah.
to that for sure.
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Wow.
So what's one thing, both of you can answer this, what's one thing you would leave listeners, mostly business owners, what would you leave them with? What's one piece of advice or, a thought?
Sure. Why don't you go first?
I just be prepared, right? Like I just feel like there's that opportunity and not opportunity. That's that I don't want to be morbid here, but there's a chance that tomorrow you're not going to be here,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
There's going to be that. And what's going to happen for your family? Like
Right.
what's going to happen?
We have those conversations.
Well,
I'm like, God
every day.
forbid something happens. I'm like,
Every day.
I don't want to be morbid. I don't want to kill anyone off.
That's
But
what
if
it
something
is.
happens,
Yeah.
we need to do the planning.
And
so
it's just one of those things where have a conversation. That's it. That's all it is. And understand what it is, what it's going to look like for you and your family.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say. Like
that's a
honestly.
great thought.
In the same vein, be opportunistic. by preparing, it allows you to say yes to things when the opportunity is there. So if the market is strong, there's no worse place to be than the market's really strong and people are really interested in M&A and your books are a hot mess.
Yeah.
You got all this concentration and you can't take advantage of it.
Correct.
So, the preparation goes hand in hand in terms of just always being open to opportunity. I talked to a company a few years ago who's like, I would never sell to private equity. I was like, okay, well, you don't have to. Nobody's making you do anything. And there's other types of buyers too. And then fast forward 3 years later, they ended up transacting to private equity groups. So he was smart enough to go, you know what, like, let me be opportunistic, and took those years to get prepped and planned. And actually it's worked out, really well for them. So just be open.
It's always worth the conversation, like you said.
Right.
Yeah. Have the
Exactly.
conversation. Have the conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Dena and Lori, it's been such an insightful conversation. We really appreciate you both taking the time to walk us through, how this process actually works and giving our listeners a clearer picture of the options that exist for business owners.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest takeaways from today's conversation is that exiting a business doesn't have to be a sudden decision. With thoughtful planning, and we're a broken record with planning, and the right guidance, it can be a strategic process that gives founders and business owners flexibility and control and options for their future. And that's something we care deeply about. So helping people think ahead so they can make decisions with confidence. It's so important for us.
Yeah, and for many business owners, their company represents years of dedication and sacrifice. It's basically their life, so taking time to plan for that next chapter is so important as building the business itself. So we really, really appreciate you guys taking the time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dena and Lori, for joining us.
This was
and sharing
absolutely
your
lovely.
experience.
Thank you
for
so much for
having us.
having
It was
us.
really fun.
Yeah,
It's a ball.
absolutely.
I could go on and on, but
I know.
I'm like, EBITDA. Let's do a lesson on
My
EBITDA.
330s over here, like, what is
There's
going
so
on?
many offshoots of these pods that can go, well, that'd be a great conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. That's another great
No, I know.
conversation.
We need to have
We
him
can
back
talk
again.
No, for sure.
So, to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in to Wade Through It All. We're so glad you're here. If you found today's conversation helpful, please consider sharing the episode with a business owner or an entrepreneur who might benefit from hearing it. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you're notified when new episodes are released, and give us a follow on Instagram at @RMWadeandCompany for even more educational content. So we'll see you next time on Wade Through It All. Thanks for being here. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Dena Jalbert and Lori McLane and Align Business Advisory are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial and RM Wade and Company, Ltd.